Welcome to the Prison Pod, a podcast for all people experiencing incarceration. The mission of this podcast is to save lives, restore hope, reduce suffering, and recidivism. Many show ideas come directly from the listeners, so please write the host. Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine, 04473. Here is your host, Ms. Valerie.
Welcome to the Prison Pod. Today's guest, Madinah Wilson-Anton, is currently serving in the Delaware House of Representatives. She is the first practicing Muslim elected to the Delaware General Assembly. In her work and in her comedy, she fights for social, economic, and racial justice. She is also a person who is living with vitiligo. And I just found out this morning that she has a short film, Stand Up for Madinah, the U.S. politician pushing for peace in Gaza. I'd like to welcome you, Madinah.
Thank you for having me.
So I know we were going to really focus on comedy, but since Gaza is so hot in the news right now, maybe we could talk a little bit about that first, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you could just tell people just a quick little thing about what the film is about and where they can find it.
Sure. Yeah. So the film, it's a documentary, short documentary about 30 minutes, and it follows my work as a state representative here in Delaware trying to get a ceasefire. So advocacy at the state level, at the federal level, with the community protests, going down to the U.S. Capitol and meeting with Congress people and asking them to do what they can to get a ceasefire. And then it also follows my journey as a comedian, trying to do stand up. So that's kind of the title is a play on words because it's standing up for justice but also stand up comedy. And so there's a bit of comedy throughout the film as well.
I love that. And
Yeah.
as you know, we really need some humor in life. So I really
Yes.
love seeing the work that you do and that you have a very light way about you with some humor. So that's always great to see, especially in the political realm.
Yes, the topics can get very heavy, and I take them very seriously. And so some of my colleagues find it strange that I do comedy because they're like, she has a sense of humor because I'm very serious at work. But I think it is really important to have a sense of humor as well. And to answer your earlier question, for folks that want to watch the documentary, you can find it on YouTube. It was produced by Al Jazeera English, and so it's on their YouTube page under their Witness series. But you could also just go on YouTube and like type in "Stand Up for Madinah" and it should come up. But yeah, I mean, comedy is an amazing part of life, right? Like finding humor in difficult topics is really important to healing and processing. So I've enjoyed being able to bring a little bit of comedy to some dark conversations and also to bring heavy topics to comedy at times to have people think about issues that they might not have thought about. Like, for example, my vitiligo. I do a lot of jokes about vitiligo, and people will then kind of feel more comfortable asking me questions afterwards, things that they wanted to know and didn't feel comfortable asking.
So some people have just a podcast and some people get video. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about vitiligo?
Sure, yeah. So for folks that are listening and can't see me, I am an African American woman. Most of my life, I was completely brown. And then when I was in college, I started to develop spots that turned lighter brown and then eventually turned completely white. And now about half of both of my hands are white, and I have white patches on my face and around my body. And it's called vitiligo. It's an autoimmune condition, which basically means that your immune system, instead of fighting off infection and bad guys, it's fighting itself. It's kind of like that friend you might have who's ready to get into a fight and they slap themselves, and you're like, could you not? Could you focus? Yeah, my immune system is attacking its melanin, the cells that create melanin. And some people develop vitiligo as children. Sometimes they develop it later in life after traumatic events. They don't quite understand exactly what causes it or why some people develop it and others don't. No one in my family has it. And like I said, I developed it as an adult. So it was an interesting experience. And as a Black woman, who was, in her early 20s, really becoming secure and confident in my identity as a Black woman, to then start to develop these spots and worry, am I going to become a white woman eventually? was a really it was really difficult. It was a difficult experience, and I've learned to love my skin, and I've connected with a lot of folks across the country who have vitiligo, who've had it from childhood, who developed it as adults, and it's really been a blessing to be able to connect with people. This summer was my first time attending a World Vitiligo conference, and it was overwhelming. It was a lot of emotion, but it was a really, really great experience.
It must be to see so many people that are experiencing the same thing as you. And
Yes.
also to be able to have those conversations of how people experience it. Because I have a friend who also has vitiligo, and there was a time I didn't know it because she always covered with makeup.
Mm.
So, I didn't know. So, then the first time I saw her without it, I was really surprised, you know? But,
Yes.
yeah. So and it's people don't have an understanding, and that's why the conversations are always great to have to build understanding amongst us.
Absolutely. And comedy can be a way to bridge that gap and have people get more comfortable and learn. So that's been exciting. When I first started doing comedy, I didn't do any jokes about vitiligo. And I was told that, and you might have noticed this if you ever watched comedy or listened to comedy, a lot of times if a comedian has something that's very distinct about them, they'll make a joke about it right up front. And the advice that I was given was, when you have something that's kind of distracting to the viewer, you should just immediately get it out of the way, and then they can focus on what else you want to talk about. So one day I thought about my vitiligo and I thought, oh, my skin is gentrifying itself. My body is, you know, and so then I started thinking, okay, well, what happens when a neighborhood becomes white? And so I started writing jokes about that. And now I have probably 10 minutes of just vitiligo jokes. When I first started, I wasn't talking about it at all. But it's been an interesting experience. It's been fun to be able to share these jokes with other people with vitiligo. People always come up to me after shows and they're like, "Oh, my sister has," and they'll start to like connect with me over it. So it's been a really good experience being able to talk about it on stage.
So now your comedy.
Yes.
Do you have a couple of favorite stand-up pieces that you might wanna share with our listeners? Because I know they can always use a laugh.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I talk about my skin, right? So, um, if you're not familiar with gentrification, that is when, if you live in a Black or Hispanic community, rich white people start to move in. You may have noticed these little signs, right? Like you're walking down a familiar street and you notice like a white couple with a dog, and you're like, they feel comfortable here. That's my shoulder. That's what my shoulder's doing. It's just a white couple walking a dog, or like, sometimes you might notice you're walking down the street and you're like, what used to be in that storefront? That wasn't a Whole Foods before, that kind of thing, right? So I could go on and on and just talk about how my body is basically the neighborhood we all used to know and love, but now don't recognize. What else can I tell you guys? Oh, so something else that I get a lot with having vitiligo is people will come up to me and try to give me advice on how to cure it, right? So if you have anything that's noticeable, you may have experienced this. People give you unsolicited medical advice, right? My favorite was a guy told me the cure was to take my finger, put it in my mouth, get a little saliva, dab it on the spots. I was like, did I shake his hand when I walked over here? He's nasty. Yeah. And then my favorite is kids always ask me questions, right? And it's fun because I can watch their parents like mortified and embarrassed that their kids are asking me what they think is a rude question, and they often are like, "What happened to your hand?" And I tell them, "Well, when I was your age, my mommy told me to do something and I didn't listen, and she smacked the black off me." Listen to your parents. Yeah. That's probably my favorite. And
Cute. I like
for
that.
anyone who grew up Black, they know that's a very common threat that parents will say, "I'll smack the black off you." So if you meet someone who says, "Oh, it actually happened," then little Black kids that have heard it are like, "Let me go do my chores. Let me let me go clean my room before my mom does that to me."
So, I have a lot of people that I hear from that are Muslim, and I would like to know if there is anything from faith that you might want to share with them about hope.
That's a deep question, Valerie. Faith about hope. Um, I mean, I can share what keeps me going because my job can be very frustrating. There are a lot of issues that we see day to day that we'd like to fix that take a long time, and that can be really frustrating. And I'm very impatient in that way. But what I remember is as a Muslim, we're taught that we are rewarded based on our intention, uh, not based on the outcome, right? And so what I try to remind myself is what's most important for me to do is to continue to have the correct intention, which is to help people to, in whatever situation, try to bring justice to people, try to make things fair, and to keep the mindset that no matter what happens, as long as my heart is in the right place and I'm moving in accordance with that intention, that I'll be, rewarded in the end by God. And to not focus so much on what actually happens, because that's where we start to get hopeless when we feel like, oh, well, it's not going as quickly as I thought it was going to be, or it's not as successful as I wanted it to be. And there have been times where I have felt pretty hopeless. And when I remember those times where I felt alone or, isolated, there's always a very random person or situation that is sent to kind of snap me back and remind me. Around the Gaza advocacy, a lot of my coworkers were not happy with the way that I was advocating. They weren't happy with the style that I was using and the strategies that I was using. And so they really were trying to isolate me as much as they could. And I felt incredibly lonely. And I remember I was out to eat with my family members, and it was like it was that time of the month where I was really low on money, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And I didn't really want to go out to eat, but you know how it is sometimes with family, and they're like, "Oh, what's all that?" And you're like, I don't know if I got it, but like, what's the cheapest thing on the menu?" And so I was like kind of stressed out about that, but trying to act, relaxed. And somebody recognized me on the way in, and I recognized them from some advocacy work, and just kind of said hi and then sat down and enjoyed with my family. And when it was time for the check to come, the waitress said, "Oh, that family that was at that table covered it for you." And I was like, whoa, and I wrote it down in my journal because it was one of those instances where it's right on time, where the message is right on time. And I didn't want to forget it because it's so easy when things are difficult for you to focus on how difficult it is and oh, woe is me. And this is the worst. And it's never going to be any, and it's always like this. Right. And so I wrote that down in my journal, and I maybe looked back at it once in the last few years, but just the act of writing it down is enough to trigger that for myself, right? So that it's a reminder that when I felt most alone, I wasn't, right? And so that's something that I just share. It's a bit personal, but if you're able to put pen to paper in moments like that, I found that it's been very helpful for me, and I often don't have to go back and look at it to remind myself after.
Thank you for sharing that and adding the personal piece in there because sometimes we don't share those personal pieces of us, and people love to hear our stories because, we're the only ones who can tell our own story, right?
That's true. Yeah.
So, in your workplace, you were the first practicing Muslim in the workplace. Do you work with any other Muslims now?
No, not yet. I'm hoping that one of these days another Muslim will be elected, but right now I'm the only one. But I do work with a lot of members of the Muslim community in, day to day that reach out to my office for assistance and, with ideas on ways that we can move the community forward. But at the moment, I'm still the only elected.
And how about community organizations? Are you involved in any that you would like to talk about and mention anything about their websites or anything like that?
Sure, yeah. So specifically Muslim or just in general?
In general.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I'm very active with the Delaware Working Families Party, which is, a nonprofit that's focused on getting basically a multiracial working class working together to better our communities. And so I'm very active with them. Here in Delaware, they have a lot of different events that they do, and they do different programs in different communities. Right now, one of the things that they're focused on is making sure that rent is affordable. We have like incredibly high rent here in the state, and people are getting priced out of basically anywhere safe to live. It's really horrible situation. So they've been working on that, and a lot of different issues. Of course, I'm blanking on some of the others right now, but that's been the one. Last year, one of the big issues they were working on was making sure that all students in our schools have free breakfast and lunch. So you don't have to worry about packing for your kids and coming up with the money to pack lunch or breakfast. And you also wouldn't have to worry about the stigma where some kids qualify for free lunch, but they don't want to be bullied or looked at differently from their classmates. And they found that when all students are given lunch and all students are given breakfast for free, they eat it. And they don't have, that embarrassment that comes along with getting it for free. And they perform better in school when they're fed. So that was something else that they were really active on. And so I would say the Working Families Party, I'm very active with them. Another group is Delawareans for Palestinian Human Rights, which is a local group that's focused on bringing about human rights for Palestinians. I've been active with them since I was about 19, 18 when I first went to college. And they're just an amazing group, members of all religious backgrounds, all ethnicities. The co-founders are a married couple, Palestinian Christian and a Jewish American, right? And it's the perfect couple to lead a really diverse group that cares about making sure we all are able to live with dignity, no matter what our ethnicity is. So those are two that I'd shout out off the top of my head.
I love that. There's so many great groups out there that we don't talk about. So I love it when I hear about new ones that I can go and find out more about and also share information with others. I know at one time you lived with your family unit,
Yes.
extended family. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of extended families?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish that our country and society was more like some others, right? Where it's normalized and there's enough space and the houses are set up in a way where you can live in multi-generational households. Um, my husband and I moved in we lived with his parents for a time, and we lived with my mom and my sisters. And when we moved in with my mom and sisters, it was to make sure that they didn't lose the house because they were at risk of the house being foreclosed on. We were paying for an apartment. And so we figured, well, instead of us paying rent to some company, right, we could pay rent to my mom and that'll help her pay the mortgage. And it was a really interesting experience. It wasn't all good, right? There was plenty of tension. And I'm sure your listeners and watchers who have lived with family have had some of these experiences, right? Where you have personalities clashing and you have a lot of adult, opinions under one roof. But it was also really beneficial. It was a time where, we were able to help each other out financially. We were able to save money so we could eventually buy a house. We were able to all share in the work of making dinner every night and doing the grocery shopping. And I mean, it was pretty nice only having to cook dinner one night a week. I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad setup at all because I think it was 6 of us at the time. So we each had one night, and then one night of the week we called it toss-up night, fend for yourself, right? So you had to figure out what you were eating. But the other nights of the week, it was a pretty nice setup. And so, and I've seen in some other countries they have like social housing where they'll have roommates, and one person will be, say, a millennial, a younger person, and then a senior citizen, right? And they're able to help each other out in different ways. And the senior is able to give life advice and mentorship, and the younger person that's in the household is able to do some heavy lifting, or maybe carry things up the stairs that need to come up from the groceries, or things like that. And it's a you know symbiotic kind of relationship, right? Where both parties are benefiting something from the relationship. And I think that's something that we kind of should get back to in this country, right?
Music by Stir Crazy Music. www.stircrazymusic.com.
Attention! Choreo, a better way to connect with loved ones who are incarcerated. Without Choreo, family and friends wait for a call and hope they can answer. With Choreo, inmates can call or message at any time. When your inmate calls their Choreo number, they will hear your voice and text messages. Inmates receive and leave messages at any time using standard prison phones, making connection easy and predictable. For information about Choreo, visit choreo.org. Stay connected.
I see my grandmother about once a week, sometimes a little bit less than that. And some of the stories that I hear are stories I've heard many times, but every once in a while there's a new thing, right? There's a new story, there's a new lesson that she shares. And I just feel like there's so much we can learn from each other. I know my grandmother really appreciates when we come over and help her with her technology, because she loves to use the computer, but she does not love to deal with the problems that come along with that, right? And so I think it can be really beautiful. And if everyone's able to be respectful and, compassionate, then it can really work.
So now I have a trick question that I didn't prepare you for.
Uh-oh.
I ask this to a lot of my guests. Has there been a book in your life that has really hit? It can even be a childhood book that you loved hearing as a kid. But I'm just curious if you had a favorite book.
That's a really good question. Um, I'll share the most recent favorite with you because I think it could also be helpful for folks. Which it's called Let This Radicalize You. Have you heard of it? Is it familiar? I just want to pull up
I
the
haven't.
author's name because I don't want to get it wrong. But I read it, was it last year or the year, 2 years ago now. It's by Kelly Hayes and Miriam Kaba, and it's available as an audiobook as well. It's so good. It's about advocacy. It's one of the stories that I shared earlier, right? Like about recognizing moments, and it's so well done. It's something that I think is inspiring, but it's also kind of a 101 kind of like playbook in a way. There's a lot of examples that they'll share of communities working together and being successful. And then also examples of what happens when things don't go the way that you want. How do you respond? And it's one of those books that I feel you can learn from every time you go back to it. And so after I first read it, I got a little bit obsessed and started giving it to all of my friends. And like folks that would come to me and say, "Oh, I want to run for office," I'd be like, "Okay, read this first." So I would say that's my favorite right now. Yeah.
I will have to look that up.
Yeah. Let This Radicalize You.
I like that. It's a great title.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It's provocative.
So now I have another question. What gets you up in the morning? What do
Ooh.
your drive that keeps you going?
Yeah, this is more recent, but it's the caffeine headache. I recently got into drinking caffeine. I had staved off the caffeine addiction for 31 years, and I don't know what it was that got me into drinking it, and now if I don't get up and drink caffeine, I have a headache. So that's the silly answer. But I would say what gets me up is feeling like I can make a difference. And I'm very blessed in that both my roles as a elected official and as a comedian give me space where I can help people and I can make people feel better, even if it's just for 30 minutes, right? To bring a smile to their face and have them forget the worries that they have. And it's a really amazing feeling, and it gives me it fills my life with purpose. And so that's something that I look forward to doing every day.
I love that you're not afraid to be who you are. I like that you are able to touch on topics that may be a little sensitive to bring light to other people of what's going on, and to do it with humor. Curious, do you have any comedy around the police department?
Ooh. Do I have any? I don't think I have any police jokes yet.
I bet you could come up with some
Oh
sometime.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good top actually. I'm gonna write that one down because there's definitely there's material there. I could say one of my favorites from a different comedian, Dave Chappelle. He's got some jokes about the police, and he's got one of my favorites is when he talks about his white friend Chip, and he does this impression of his white friend Chip and how they have different reactions to the police. And so when Dave sees the police, he's like, oh no. And Chip is like, I'm gonna ask him for directions. And like that's one of my favorite, like I could look back on all the comedy that I've watched over the years and there's like a few standouts that I always remember, and that's one of them is Dave Chappelle's impression of his friend and the police, and the friend is asking for directions and he's like, where's 6th Street? And the cop is like, take it easy. You're on 6th Street. It's just like the way that he responds to the white friend is like way different than how Dave would expect him to respond to him. I've been blessed as a Black woman to not have too much interaction with the police over the years, but I have had my interactions with them where I'm like, yeah, this is why we don't want to be around police. um, yeah. So that's a topic I haven't delved into much, but I'm putting it on the list for sure.
Mm. Yeah, and prison humor. I'm sure if you ever was looking for some good prison humor, you could put out a shout out on social media and they would send you letters. I would love to be able to interview some of the guys that are inside that are comedians because they have it's a different type of humor, but it's definitely funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's so much material. There's probably, and they probably do impressions too. Like I
Oh,
could
I
see there
bet.
being some pretty good impressions of like different guards and stuff. And
Yeah.
like when you're around people for a while, you start to pick up on their mannerisms, you know? That's so before I officially started doing comedy, I used to do impressions at work. And some of my coworkers were like, you should like do this. You should try to do like the Daily Show or something because I would do like a Kamala Harris impression and like she's not really relevant anymore, but like when she first was running, I would come in and I would do my Kamala Harris impression and they'd be like, your impression's better than mine. I was like, you got to do this. And then I would do impressions of like my coworkers and stuff, and like I could see the guys being very good at that. Finding
I bet.
the little intricacies, you know.
Yeah. I imagine that lightens up the office too when you can joke
Oh
around.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite part of your work that you do?
Mm, I mean, I think my, overall favorite is being able to help people and just there's there are times, like I said, where it's very frustrating because you want to say, you know, cap rent. I want rent to be $1,200 maximum for, like that kind of thing. And that's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it'll be years and years into the future, you know? So like, it's very demoralizing at times. But what I try to remind myself is of the instances, and there are many, where I have been able to help someone, where me and my assistant paying attention to an email or a phone call was able to change someone's life. And that is something that you just it's priceless. It's a priceless, interaction. And, on election day, people have come up to me and said, I'm here to vote for you because you got my husband his unemployment check, or you got me. And it's like, wow. And it's a reminder of how the day-to-day work that we do is so impactful to someone and their family. A more specific thing, though, that I love to do in this role is whenever I get invited into our elementary schools to read to kids or to watch them, do their performances, or even like the moving up ceremonies when they're moving from elementary to middle school and things like that. Those events are always my favorite to RSVP yes to, and to just be there to celebrate their accomplishments. I got invited a couple years ago to attend one of the classes. They had market night where they, as a class, they had like little teams and they came up with an item that they were going to sell, a product they were going to sell. And then they made the products, and then they had a day where they, in the gymnasium, each had a table and they were selling stuff, and you pay like $10 and get like bucks, and then you could spend them in the market. And I went in to read to them. I think it was like Read Across America Day or something like that. And they had such a good time. They were like, you have to come back. Can you come back? We're going to have market day. And I was like, ooh, you want me to come back? Like, that's my favorite. I will clear my schedule if the kids want me to come back to school and hang out. And so that was really fun. And I have some knickknacks around the house that I bought that they made and sold. And that's the fun part of the job. And, getting to, it's a reminder really that those kids are the reason why we do the work that we do, is, to make a better future for our community. And they're just, the living examples of why and who you're doing it for. So that's my favorite part.
I love that with the kids because kids remember. If you come back a second time, they're going to remember that when they're 25 or 30 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Remember that lady?
one of the best moments was when I was in the local grocery store, and went to get in line, and I made eye contact with this little girl, and she stopped in her track and she looked at me and she came over and gave me a hug. And I'm like, who's this kid? I was like, oh, she was one of the kids in that class. And her dad's looking at me like, who is this woman? And she's like, she came to our school. And I'm like, okay, this could be a little suspect, right? If your kid just runs up to a stranger. But I was like, oh, it was so touching that she remembered me, and just a beautiful reminder that the kids in the school are the kids in the neighborhood, the kids in the community, right? And so that was a really, really sweet moment. Yeah.
Well, the thing that's really sweet about that, not only did she remember you, but you had the presence when you were there that she could hug you. You
Mm,
were a person that felt safe. And that's a great thing for children to see in an adult.
yeah. And they always ask the best questions about vitiligo. They've given me some material, I'll tell you. I was trying to explain like the science of it and everything. And one of the kids says, oh, like Michael Jackson? And they're like 8. I was like, how do they even know? Yeah, exactly. Like, I didn't think they would know who he was. And then one of the kids asked me, does it change? Can your vitiligo change? And I said, yeah. So I pulled up some pictures from 2018 where my hand was mostly brown, and I showed them the side by side. And one of them, hand went up in the air, and I called on them, and he said, I was born in 2018. And I was like, ooh, wow. Wow.
Mm. So we've been chatting here a little over a half hour. I'm wondering, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to talk about before we start wrapping things up?
Anything that we should talk about? I mean, I would just say I love the work that you're doing. I think this is a really amazing project. It's important. And as an elected official, I get letters from folks that are incarcerated. I've met with family members who've come down and advocated for changes in our correctional facilities in the state. I just, in the last 6 months, went for the first time in and visited a facility and like got to see it myself. And what I'll say is the work that you're doing, the work that family members do when they come and they advocate is so important, and it's actually very impactful. And if it wasn't for that work, I think a lot of us who aren't impacted, we would be none the wiser about the things that are really important to improve quality of life for all of us in our community. So I'm really appreciative. I know it's difficult work. And so I just want to thank you and thank anyone who's listening or watching who spent time to reach out to their elected officials to share their stories. It's really important. I know it's not easy, but got to keep doing it, right? And it will eventually be worth it in the end.
Thank you so much for that. Um, I am very happy to hear that you have been in a correctional facility because I believe anybody who works in the field of social welfare or any type of government, they need to go in and see what's happening inside the jails and prisons across the country to really have an understanding of that. And thank you so much for your kind words because it can be a tough job sometime, and it's really nice to be recognized for the work that people like me do because there's so many of us out there that are advocating for better lives for everybody.
Yes. And you've had some successes, right? And so that's something else, like just to remember, whether it's by journaling or cataloging, or scrolling through photos or whatever, periodically to remind yourself of the accomplishments and the wins that you've made, no matter how small they are, to keep you going, right? And I know just in the last year here in Delaware, we've had some changes that have made it easier for folks to get compassionate release, for example. And that was through years of community members and family members advocating for those changes. And now we're going to have a reality where people are able to be released because people who are not a risk, to their communities, who are dealing with health issues, like it should be a no-brainer, right? And so that's a major win. It took way too long to get to it, but it's because of the work of people like you that it's a reality now. And we can, hope and pray that we continue to work on these things and that quality of life will continue to improve for everyone, whether they're incarcerated or they're not.
I really appreciate the work you do. I love your spirit. You're so sweet. You really have a very nice presence, and it's great to know that there's people out there working for the underdogs.
Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for reaching out and inviting me. And maybe one day I'll be able to come back. It was great chatting with you.
Okay. Thank you for being a guest.
You have been listening to the Prison Pod, a podcast not just for those in prison but for anyone who has been affected by incarceration. Ms. Valerie would love for you to write to her with your questions, comments, and show ideas. The address is Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine. 04473.